Welcome, friends, to GameMasters Studio, where we talk shop about running tabletop role-playing games. With us today is Jared and Ed, with your host, Jerry.
Hello and welcome to GameMasters Studio. We'll be discussing tabletop role-playing games and tips and tricks that you can use to help your game at home, help run things a little bit smoother, have some fun in the process. Today we're going to be talking about the difference in styles between preparation and improvisation and how you can bring those into your own games to help you work there. My name is Jerry, aka Frieden. I'm your host and moderator today, a DM with nearly 3 decades of experience. With me in the studio is Jared, aka dm.f, proprietor of Mad Doc Designs, creator of the World of Wrath, and semi-professional DM. And Ed.
My name's Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite podcast on the Citadel.
All right, so we're going in today to talk about preparation versus improvisation, like I said earlier. Now, our sessions so far that we've been here, we've been talking about getting things ready, getting the game going, getting ready to get started, and we've been focusing very heavily on the players. Mm-hmm. We've been looking at identifying player types, we've been talking about making characters, we've been talking about group size, we've been talking about bringing people together, but now it's time to kind of almost push your players aside and focus entirely on the GM side of things, even before you get down to the session for your first time. We're talking about the 2 styles, the preparation, where you're going to sit down, you're going to plot things out, you're going to plan, you're going to have everything decided, you're going to know what's going to happen, you're going to have everything in place, and improvisation, where you're going to get a general idea of what's going on, understand characters, understanding what they want, how they'll go about it, but other than that, making up and reacting to the PCs as they take actions. How does the world react to them? What goes down on the fly? And we're going to be looking at those 2 styles, how they contrast, and how you, well, in all honesty, I'll give away the end game of it. You should probably use a blend, but you want to figure out what blend works for you. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be starting, let's talk about preparation. The ultra planning, spending hours putting things together. Yeah. Pros and cons. Let's start with the pros. What are the benefits of preparation?
Oh, certainly. You know what's coming. You know your world. I in a perfect world, have created a gaming system, a gaming world that I'm in, where the history has been laid out, the map has been laid out. You have all that information there. You know, the different, like, major players in the group, you know, or sorry, not the major players in the group, but the major players in the world, you know, and you have that all planned out. Preparation's good to have that, not only that atmosphere that you can capture by having all of that information available, but also preparing all of the encounters that are coming up.
Yeah, I mean, it is a lot of work, although that's kind of more getting on the con side. But definitely. I think preparation definitely allows you to present a rich world, a game that's ready to go, you know, right out of the gate. Here's stuff that's happening. Here's a detailed description of it. I've played with GMs that, even though they made up their own work, it was almost as if they were running a pre-made module. Right. Because they did that much preparation, they had that much detail, all of the speeches typed out, all of the reactions pre-prepared, everything pre-canned to be able to bring to the table. I think that's a lot to do up front, but it allows, in many ways, the game to run very smoothly. I think a highly prepared game has very little in the way of surprises. Mm-hmm. There's very little that's going to throw you off track. You know where it's supposed to go, and you have a pretty good idea of what you want the end result from your players to be.
And with enough preparation, if your players go off into a bit of a tangent, and they say, well, what's the name of this guy here? You know, you have that. You may take a second to look for it, but you have that. It's there, and it'll never change. Where sometimes when I wing it, which is fine too. Sometimes I wing it. I give him a name, but then later on I think of a different name for him. And, you know, preparation certainly helps you with consistency. It's a big help with consistency.
Yeah, I'm personally heavily on the improv side, but if I do have to improv a name or something along those lines, I'll definitely jot it down in my notes. Here's a side tip for all you DMs. Whenever you're running, take notes, especially on what you say, because the PCs are going to bring that up later, guaranteed.
That's just after the fact preparation.
It is, which is an interesting side of it. After the fact preparation, look at what we just did, and how does that correlate? How does that build new experiences out of what just happened?
Is it after the fact preparation, or is it preparation for the next session?
Well, it is preparation for the next session that was kind of dictated by what happened in this session.
Right. And another trick you can do too, some people do, I've done it in the past, is you can use like a tape recorder and record your sessions, and then you can go back and just to kind of take cliff notes of what's important. Some people don't want to be distracted in the moment to take the actual physical notes and write things down. There's different ways you can handle that. Definitely on the preparation side, there's huge advantages. The more prep you do, the more you have to lean on. I think a big trick is don't use it I don't like prep to the point of scripting unless it's like a cut scene or some sort of like descriptive text for a specific room.
Again, we're going to be talking about cutscenes and monologuing in a future episode.
But it goes along with the prep. But if you over prep or over prepare to the point that like every single thing you need to go to your notes to read from, then you can get thrown off, or you might lose your note, and it can kind of delay the game. And some people are like that, and that's fine, but I think then that's important for you to know how to organize yourself, make sure that you know how to find what you need, and you'll have to come up with your own organizational skills if every single thing needs to be written down. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, this is all about like one versus the other, but not prep's not better than improv, and improv's not better than prep. It all comes down to the DM. I think it comes down to the DM style himself. Like Jerry mentioned, I do a nice blend of both, or I say a nice blend. I do a blend of both. Nice is relative. Where I like to do a lot of prep for a foundation. I like to have my world established in whatever region that I'm running the game. I have my World of Wrath. I've spent a lot of time working on Wrath. It's still in progress and still needs so much work. It's disheartening to think about almost. But having that strong foundation, it allows me to improv all building off of that foundation. So I can say, as long as I know I have this town established, I have a map built for this town, I have the important NPCs of this town, and then I can have like a little random name-generated list off to the side for random NPCs I don't plan on or haven't already created.
Right.
Knowing the important NPCs, knowing their personality traits, or a general idea of what they are and what they're about, I can then improv their conversations. If I have certain information that I need to get across to the party, I don't have to have that scripted. I know what needs to be said. I know what that NPC knows. I can spit it out in a conversation. Mm-hmm. But I can, it gives me a lot of room to wiggle. It gives me a lot of room to be creative and on the fly. Maybe I might, because you never know when a great idea is going to hit you in that moment.
Right.
And that'll also be something that we'll be talking about in a future episode as well, making memorable NPCs, which prep can really help for that. If you know that a character is going to have a significant amount of spotlight time, you're going to be spending more time on figuring out who this is, where they're coming from, why they're doing, what their capabilities are.
Interestingly, actually, some of my more memorable NPCs were NPCs that I improv'd, but we don't have to necessarily get into that now. I wanted to make a point real quick that there is a con to the prep side of things is over preparation. And it's a number of ways. First, if you build like an entire world and, the important figures of all the people in the cities in the world and like dungeons around the cities, and your group only ever goes between like 2 or 3 cities and back through the course of your game, that's a lot of great stuff that you have for the future still. So certainly maybe run some campaigns, but that's a lot of work that you did for a game that you maybe didn't have to do at the time. And the second thing onto that is I actually had a player once who had a really kind of rich backstory that I wanted to tap. And I wrote up all kinds of events for like future encounters to help with his backstory and all kinds of stuff. I wrote all kinds of stuff. It was going to be glorious. 2 sessions after I finished, he retired the character. He was done playing him. He was tired of him. So I had all of this stuff planned, that I never got to. I mean, I tweaked it, some of the stuff that I could.
Yeah, I mean, some of that's recyclable, and unfortunately, that's an unforeseeable event.
Yeah.
I think if you feel like you're over prepping and stuff goes to waste, it's really easy to kind of put that on the shelf. And then maybe down the road, you'll start to see someone who's kind of fitting in and could kind of fit in the same place. So you take it off, you dust it off, you change some of the names, maybe file off the serial numbers, and then bring it back into play.
Yeah, over prep for one game is extra prep for a future game. Some things can always be reused, reduced, recycled. So while it might have been extra work you didn't need to have ready for this weekend's game, it's less work that you have that you can use down the road for another game. Maybe not this game, maybe a whole different game with a whole different group of players. But I want to say there's no such thing as too much preparation. There very much can be.
Yeah.
And there's also that over preparation being used later on can also work when your players throw you a curveball. One of the examples I've used when I'm talking about DMing is, imagine the opening scene of Star Wars. The ship is being stormed by the stormtroopers, and the rebels are being overrun, and in comes Darth Vader, big, bad, menacing. I'm assuming that everybody has seen Star Wars, so I'm not worried about spoiling at least this part of it. Let's assume, rather than things go as they do, one of the PCs who are playing the rebels say, hey, I have this thermal detonator that I bought. I'm going to trigger it and chuck it down the corridor. And you decide to roll, and the thermal detonator blows out the boarding lock. Everybody in that corridor swept out into space, and now Darth Vader is dead. So what do you do there as a DM? One of the options that you have is take that prep that you did as Darth Vader, change the name, so now it's Deke Starkiller is the Empire's right-hand man, and everything that you were going to do with Vader is now somebody else. You can take that prep, you can reuse it, and your players will never know because all of that stuff never came into play. This is more on the improv side, but it's very important to remember that nothing that the players have not experienced is set in stone.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything that they don't know can be changed.
Yeah, I mean, you're improving the fact that you're changing who's using that information, but at the same time you're taking advantage of your prep, so that's where that blend comes back into play.
Right.
Okay, well, I had planned on villain X being having this backstory, but now villain Y is going to use it, but I get to improv where I'm going to shift this information, where I'm going to shift the story, who's going to be the new villain.
Right.
Or maybe the players didn't even know that Darth Vader was in that hallway, so now he wasn't in the hallway, and guess what? He was actually on the other end of the ship, and it wasn't even a problem.
Right. And I'm not even sure it necessarily has to be improv. If you had planned up some really cool things for your villain to do, once again, let's say it's Darth Vader and he gets blown out of an airlock in the first session, then have it be that Darth Vader had a secret brother who was working as well, and now he wants revenge against the group, and you have Darth Schmader or whatever it is.
Or you have it, oh yeah, you blew the guy out of the airlock, that was Darth Schmader, and now Darth Vader is coming around, and he has all of this going on.
Yeah, exactly, which goes hand with the whole, they didn't know that he was there.
And that creates an interesting dynamic as part of as a player and as a character in the world. Is not only did you defeat the bad guy who was on his way to maybe do bad things to you, sure, great, you defeated him, but now his brother wants to come after you, or his best friend, or someone.
So now the player's actions are generating additional story.
Exactly.
Which
is always fun as a player. That's always fun to have that happen.
Yeah, and I think as a DM, it's very important to build off of what the players do, so that you can see that their actions have consequences, and also so that they can see that their actions have an effect. So if the PCs rally a party to drive off the orcs, then maybe the next time the PCs come in town, that gate is staffed by troops at attention, and they're ready, and they check their papers. We can't be too careful. The PCs see that this went from being a sleepy little town to some people who are on their game.
Yeah.
Fix the world. Have your actions mean something.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a little bit of improv is natural in a game, because
it has to be. Unless
you are one of those types of GMs that can successfully predict the actions of their players, or again, because some people do like to over prep, or just have to plan everything. They have 5 or 6 different alternative options or endings for each session. It's hard to know where the player is going to go in any given presented situation. So you have to be able to work on your toes a little bit.
Now, I like to do a lot of my preparation along that lines. In a case of A or B, except it's a case of A or not A. If the players decide to go to the archaeology professor for information on the runes they found, A happens. If they don't go to see the professor, B happens. And there's no option that's not. They either do or don't go. Do they stay in the cabin or do they leave? If they leave, this happens. If they stay, this happens. There's nothing they can do that's not either staying in the cabin or leaving the cabin. That way you can kind of narrow it down a bit. If you try to do, well, A, B, C, D, or other, I can pretty much guarantee that any decent group of PCs is going to have you picking other 90 to 95% of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, where a lot of my prep comes in, again, with building those foundations, building environments, worlds, and NPCs. And again, like, it really comes down a lot to the NPCs, because the world is molded by the people that are in it. So if you have those NPCs, and I tend to have, in most of my typical games, unfortunately not Strands, but you have different motives with different NPCs of things that are going on. I don't even really worry about what they're going to do, because I know this is in motion, this is in motion, this is in motion, and this is in motion. And I'll figure out what happens, on an improv kind of side, based off of all the foundation that I've built. How they handle they handle X by doing Y. Well, now I know, they might have thwarted this situation, but they didn't address this, or this. So these are all going in motion. Okay, they might have disrupted this NPC's plans, but only for the moment. They didn't stop this NPC. How would this NPC react to that? How would they change their plans to still try to accomplish their goals? By having goals set for your NPCs, you know what they're trying to achieve, so you can kind of make, I say educated guesses as if they're real people, but you can make plans based off of their goals and what they're capable of.
Plans upon plans upon
plans. To get them back onto the path moving towards that final objective.
And here's kind of an example. I had a game where the players were supposed to go in, and I had basically prepared on there being a battle, and they were going to steal, or after the battle, they were going to get a device that was going to help progress the plot. A plot device, if you will.
A MacGuffin.
Yeah. However, they actually decided to stealth through that, and they did it very well. And instead of there being this big battle that I'd planned out, they snuck through, they found it, and I said, okay, that's fine. They get it, they get out, great job.
The entire time the bard is playing the Mission Impossible theme.
And then, the next session or session after that, I kept everything that I'd had for that battle, and I just had it like happen out in the open. Like, okay, you stole our thing, now we're coming after you. So they basically drew them out and attacked them to try to find out where the device was, that sort of thing. So, like we've been saying, if you prep something, just because your players may avoid it, whether on purpose or accidentally, doesn't mean you can't bring it back around and use it again.
Right.
Now, in terms of prep time, how much time do you think should be spent in preparation?
48 hours a day.
Why do we keep letting him in?
He said he was going to bring tacos.
Actually, I want to take that back, of course. I've been talking about prep and been kind of lifting it up a lot, but I really love the improv side of it, personally. I think it's important to do both. I think we're all kind of in the same boat on that.
I'm heavy on the improv, but I can always tell you, I always sit down at the table feeling like I spent the exact same amount of time on preparation for every session, and that exact amount of time is not enough. Even though I improv very heavily, and we'll get to talk about improv in just a minute, I feel like I've never actually done enough prep time.
And you know what? Even if you do a lot of prep time, your players are going to throw something at you, and you're going to be like, why didn't I think of that? And you're going to feel like I didn't prep that.
Yeah, honestly, in my personal experience, which is why I started leaning more and more towards improv during sessions, but, the prep of just the world and the foundation.
Yeah.
Which that's a whole argument. But I feel like the sessions that I prep specifically for this Sunday,
right,
I have this plan, this, and this, and this should take 5 hours, and that's the whole session right there. We get through it in 1 hour, and then I'm like, well, shit.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
And then on the complete contrary, where I'm like, I really only had like 2 basic ideas for today's session, and then 5 hours go by, and they're like, can we play longer? And I'm like, yeah, friggin' let's do it.
I just didn't have stuff prepared.
Like, I didn't think that this would take this long, or I didn't, realize how much the players were going to give me opportunities to improv and go off script, so to speak, which is just filling all kinds of time, and I'm totally encouraging that. I'm very much in favor of players taking me off script or players affecting the world and the environment around them.
So we can pretty much all agree that the only thing to expect from your players is stuff you weren't expecting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, if I think I've over-prepped, I've under-prepped. If I think I've under-prepped, I've over-prepped. It's just I have never hit it on the head, so I just like to build that solid foundation. I like to know what NPCs are in the region, what NPCs have what goals they have my environment, and I'll have basic encounters at the ready. But as for actual story and adventuring, like, I just improv like 90% of most of my sessions.
You know what I will say? A lot of it does actually come down to your players. Some players really like being led by the nose. Mm-hmm. And if that's a group that you're in and they're basically going to follow the plot line and do the thing, then it's pretty much all prep. I mean, interactions could be improv, and that's like with me, I mostly improv my characters and like interactions. And if a player, kind of, goes off and does their own thing, then of course we'll improv that. But sometimes you're in a group and they like being led around by the nose, so that's just going to be an all prep deal. Just make sure you have enough for everyone to do. Whereas I've been, had other groups where everyone goes off on their own tangent, so you really have to be good at improv on that.
Yeah, so let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit about improv. Obviously, improv is making up stuff at the table as it happens. I personally have had years of experience in theater before, sitting down to do serious gaming. So I have a little more experience with improv than your average GM might. And I personally do a lot of improv. I make up stuff on the fly. I've referenced my GM notebook a few times. I'm always keeping notes on what happened, what I said, what name I gave. I might have a list of names up to choose from, but if somebody says, okay, we need to go talk to this guy that sold you that stuff, what's his name? I need to come up with a name off the top of my head because I don't know who they got it from.
There's always going to be some level of preparation, but improv is really about being able to roll with the punches. Right. If you have a thing that you want your group to do and they decide to go do the other thing, your barbarian wants to go get in a bar fight. Do you, because you've only prepared for certain things, do you say, no, sorry, you can't do it? Which I would suggest not. Or do you say, yeah, okay, they start a little bar fight, don't take too much time with it, but, let him get some punches in, let him take some damage, and then move on.
And you'll have options where you can make that into part of the bigger storyline. We actually had one of the games that in Wrath that was set where a bar fight actually advanced the plot. Mm-hmm. Just a random, okay, we got into a fight, and as it turns out, in the bar, and this guy he had what we needed, so we're like, okay, well, if our guy can beat you in a bar fight, then you're gonna help us out. You're gonna help us advance our plot.
Captain Jack. That was a great NPC. Sorry. Pat myself on the back.
but your improv can definitely come up, and some of your most interesting sessions and twists, I think, come out of improv because that's where the players are going, and they start that momentum by throwing that curveball, and you just ride with it. We've had a boring role-playing session, so I'm going to throw us a bunch of orcs at you, and now your guys are like, we're going to talk to the orcs, and we're going to negotiate a peace with them. I have no idea that this was coming, but sure, let's figure out what works.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually a book I would recommend for anyone that doesn't feel comfortable with improvisation or they have some players that might need some work on it. It's actually a book called Play Unsafe. I have a downloaded copy of it that I paid for, and a physical copy of it.
Remember, don't break any laws.
Yeah. Actually, buy a version of this. It's by Graham Walmsley, if I'm probably butchered his last name. It's actually available on Amazon. I highly recommend the book. It's really only about 70, 80 pages. It's large font. It's a very quick, easy to go through read. I read the book. I read the book, and literally, like, the second I finished the last page, I flipped back to the beginning and I started reading right through it again. Because you could probably get through it in about an hour. And it's just everything in that is gold. And it's going to be a lot of stuff that the average role player knows. It's going to be a lot of stuff that the average GM's heard 1,000 times. But it's one of those things where, like, you might kind of know it, but it's just throwing the words right in your face. Like, oh, you know what? Yeah. You're right. I did that. I do that. Yeah. I do that. You know what? You're right. I shouldn't do that.
It kind of points things out to you.
Yeah, it just, it calls, a spade and kind of throws everything in your face so you know exactly what's going on. But one of the, like, the golden rule that book will go over, and that I've been preaching ever since, is, like, don't say no. Like, that's one of the biggest trick to improv, not only for GMs, but for players. And I'm not saying give players whatever they want, but try not to shut down actions. Try to work off of actions.
In fact, the golden rule of improv is yes and.
Exactly.
You say yes to the thing, and then you just kind of add on to it.
Exactly right.
Allow your players to help shape the world. Yeah, okay, maybe you did go through all this prep and you know exactly what's supposed to happen, but your player comes up with a really good idea. Okay, yeah, that's it. And also, this happens.
Yeah. And one of my favorite bits that I've used is perhaps the most powerful weapon in the GM toolbox is, yeah, sure, let's go with that.
Yeah. But when you say no, you're shutting down an action, you're shutting down players' ideas, you're shutting down things that they thought was a good idea. And yeah, there's always going to be the player like, hey, can I have a Vorpal blade? No. Sorry. But how about this?
You may have this Vorpal penknife.
Yeah. But, when you have the player again...
Hang on, guys, I'm sawing at it.
Using the example of the bar fight, like, hey, can I punch the bartender in the face? Yes. And he punches you back.
Yep.
And now you're in a bar fight, and this has led to that, and that's the other thing. And Bob's your uncle. The next thing you know, you're in mid-jail, meeting the captain of the guard, who's actually best friends with one of your best friends, and you're like, who knows where it can lead you, places you never thought would happen. But it could be some of the best role playing opportunities by improving, by saying yes and not just shutting down players. I've been shut down so many times by DMs in the past. It's just it's upsetting.
Demoralizing.
No. Yeah, it's demoralizing. Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly the word I was looking for. Like, it's just hearing no over and over again, especially when you hear it multiple times in the same session. Like, I am trying to play my character, and and I'm a GM too. So, like, when I'm a player, I typically try to, especially if I see them struggling, a little bit, I try to hand nuggets to the GM while I'm playing.
Yeah.
Here's something you can use. Like, I'm not going to go into details, but there was one game where in my personal opinion, I handed the perfect excuse for this really weird situation to the GM on a silver freaking platter. Hey, can I do this? Here you go. And I'm thinking, like, I just handed this dude the Holy Grail. Oh, this explains this really weird scenario that I can't think of any other reason how to explain. No. Totally shut me down. Instead, he had this really lame excuse for the same to explain the situation. Yeah. It, stole the glory from the players. It was all the NPCs got to be the heroes for the moment. And I'm just sitting there going, really? Come on, man. Yeah. Like, I have sat here for 4 hours doing nothing. I tried to, help you. I tried to improv. I tried to take advantage of something that I know is here and help you help us. And everyone at the table got told no that whole day, and then the NPC got to be the hero, and the whole party just left like, this sucks.
Yeah, it's really rough to hear that. As the GM, you do have the power, so you can do really whatever you want to do, but at the same time, the idea of the game is to have fun. It's a game. You're all supposed to be playing, and if someone comes up with a good idea, go with it.
I've found recently, and because you guys are playing in one of the games I'm currently running, you may have a little bit of opinion on this, but I found as a DM, a lot of times I just sit back and I listen.
Yeah.
And my players are planning and they're talking and I'm listening. Okay, they're going to do X. Well, if they do X, what's going to happen? Or they're like, well, if we do X, they're going to do Y. And I'm like, yeah, they should do Y. I get ideas from my players. I listen. I figure out what's going to happen based on what they're planning to do.
Yeah.
And it's all improv, but our sessions have wound up. I don't know if you guys have paid attention, but we've had times where it's been 30 minutes of just you guys talking and planning and me listening in.
Oh yeah. I'm very aware.
They have, to be fair, they have some very ambitious plans in the third game.
Yeah, we have some things going on where, like, if we don't sit and plan for 30 minutes, then it's all going to go wrong.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm heavy on improv, and I actually made a game. I made a scenario where the players are very heavily directing what's happening because it plays to my strengths of being able to improvise.
Yeah.
So they go out and do stuff, and I have to figure out how what they're doing works into it. I have no idea what the next session is going to hold, but I planned, I practiced, I'm taking notes, I have an idea of what people want, and I'm able to improv that.
Yeah. I would say one of your tools, if you're going to, I guess it works either way, but specifically, I think if you're a heavy improver as a GM, know your system, know those things, and one of the reasons I say that is because maybe the characters go in a different way that you didn't expect them to go that way, so maybe you want to throw an encounter at them, but maybe you don't want to throw an encounter at them that's going to be too overwhelming, or maybe they have to go up against something that you haven't really statted out yet, maybe you haven't defined it yet. Hey, one of the things I've used as an improvising GM is, okay, well, I think this thing should have around 50 hit points, should have around a +7 to hit, have 2 attacks, and do, I don't know, d6 plus 5 damage. And I have thrown monsters or villains at a group with just those basic ideas. 2 attacks, d6 plus 5 damage, +7 to hit, 50 hit points. In AC. And that's all I wrote down, and that came off the top of my head. That's an improvisation tool that you can do, when something unexpected happens.
Yeah, never be afraid to take a break either. You can be like, you know what, guys? Before we get into this encounter, it's a good time to take a break. Why don't you guys go, get a drink, have a cigarette, do whatever you're going to do, and come back in about 10 minutes.
And you know what? That's prep versus improv.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do need to take that break to prep. Mm-hmm. Other times, maybe off the top of your head, you can say, yeah, okay.
Another powerful tool for the DM, the 10-minute break.
It's true.
Yep, absolutely.
I also think for improvisation, it's important to practice.
Yeah, I was going to say practice is the key.
Well, even though it sounds like preparation, I had an extended drive to some of my games, and on the drive there, since I was driving alone, I would practice my villain monologues, or I would practice the plea from the innkeeper, or practice what I was going to lay out a scene, so that way when I got to it and it's time to go, I don't necessarily have it scripted out in front of me, but I have that idea of what I want to say because I've said it a couple of times.
Yeah, I like to practice accents in the car, so that way I can slip. When you can start slipping seamlessly between, like your English accent and your Irish accent for, defining, your different NPCs, it adds a lot. Like, you don't even have to, practice the whole monologue as long as you can talk in character as their accent, with whatever kind of quirks you might be giving them. Maybe they have a lisp, maybe they stutter, maybe they have a weird accent. Whatever you're choosing to do, if you can slip into that instead of having to, hang on a second, guys, or you just start talking as your normal self. And that comes down to acting, and I really think that, personally, I'm a huge advocate of that as a GM. I think that, GM should encourage that because it will encourage it amongst their players. If you talk in character, your players will eventually start talking in character. Yeah. Maybe not right away, but they will. But definitely practice. Not so much as a prep side, but just the more you improv, the better you'll get at it. You might not have a lot of success improving in a couple of sessions, but the more you do it, and the more practice you get at it, the better you'll be at it. But I also think that certain people should identify that not everyone can improv. Not everyone is able to get think off the top of their head, or maybe it's not even a question of the speed of thought, but just they haven't had enough practice with it yet. So you can either hone your craft, but acknowledge that you're weak at it right now, or decide, you know what, I should probably spend a little bit more time prepping for my game. I
think this is great points that we've looked at today, and I think that's actually a really good place for us to call it for now. We could obviously go on for hours and hours, but we're trying to keep it within a general time frame, just so that we keep the podcasts kind of bite-sized, at least for now. So we're going to call it here for the session, and we invite you to check us out on Facebook. You can find us on our message boards at GameMasterStudios.proboards.com, Twitter at GMS Studios, And we do post our podcast every Thursday here on Podbean, assuming you're listening, or sorry, every Tuesday. Sorry, getting the glare from the guy who posts it. Every Tuesday, we're here on Podbean right now. We may be branching off elsewhere at iTunes, some of the other fun stuff. But check us out every Tuesday. And of course, we've got less than a week to go on Jared's Kickstarter, so definitely stop into that and contribute. Links are on Twitter and Facebook and the message boards. And we will see you next time that we come back into the studio.
Peace.